Bernie, and I will call the meeting to order, and I will start, and back to you, Bernie, for the roll call.
Right. Carter,
Here.
Cheney,
Here.
Smith,
Here.
Anderson,
Present.
Burton,
Here.
Roberts,
Here.
and Hogan.
Here.
Thank you, Bernie, and now we'll open it up to public comments. Please state your name and address for the record. You have up to 3 minutes, and Bernie, I'll hand it back to you. It's raising their hand, or is it star? I'll land it to you.
Star 9, yeah.
Yes, star 9.
Okay. So yes, if you would like to make a public comment, just click the raise hand icon, or star 9 if you're calling in from your phone. So we have Susan. I see your hand is raised. I've unmuted you on our end.
On your end, can you guys hear me?
Not very well. Can you speak up or get closer to your microphone?
Can you guys hear me better now?
A little better.
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully you'll be able to hear me, but my name is Susan Oatney. I live on Lacamas Drive. I've lived here since 2008.
Can we get your address for the record?
It's 5211 Northwest Valley Court.
Thanks.
I've been working for 35 years in industrial wastewater treatment industry, mainly solving waste treatment issues for my customers, which are industrial processing. Many of my customers do have discharge permits, meaning they do not discharge to a city, but they'll discharge to a body of water like a lake or stream or river or even the ocean. Their permits are exceedingly strict, and they're part of the Waters of the U.S. Act. They, along with guidance from the federal EPA, they're continually trying to improve and better their own discharge. The number of nights on customer sites fighting to keep them in compliance it's really incalculable, and their sleepless nights are immeasurable. Not violating their discharge permits is very important to them. It's the most important thing they do. They'll shut down production, personnel go without pay, thousands will be spent on consultants and outside support to keep their industry in compliance. And the stakes are very, very high in this. It's not only for the environment, but for plant management. It's continued violation of the Clean Waters Act, which as of June 22nd was amended to be the Navigatable Waters Protection Act, can result in a felony and jail time for management. Based on the information shared by Marie Colorami, we've not only exceeded permit guidance for the Lacamas Shores biofilm, violated the maximum threshold for phosphate and TSS in December, and the City Council was notified about that verbally in June. This is really an incredibly serious situation. As mentioned above, my industrial customers that are knowingly violating this act can and they do go to jail for this. Those permit guidelines were set for a reason. Total suspended solids, phosphate, conductivity levels are all set by determining the safe amount of that particular stream can contribute to the lake without harming biology. Health advisors currently warn us about using our lake. We can't let our dogs swim and play in it. We are advised not to swim in it. Fish from it must be cleaned in a certain way. I myself, along with others, have gotten sick after accidentally ingesting water from the lake. It is the crown jewel of our community, yet day in and day out, the Lacamas Shores biofilter and other contributors are allowed to pollute it. I know many.
Susan.
Is that the 3 minutes?
About 30 more seconds.
Oh. I know many within Lacamas Shores have been pleading for nearly a decade to get the biofilter fixed. However, there's a very loud yet minority contingent in the HOA in the city that continually pursue this wetland. It cannot be ruled, and it's excluded from the Navigatable Waters Protection. This biofilter is a poorly engineered stormwater system that desperately needs maintenance. We can fix it, and I know it's crazy times right now, but we need to put together a plan to mitigate the situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. And I think we'll be talking about that a little bit later on today as well in the workshop. Thank you.
Okay. We have Scott Hogg. I've unmuted you on our side, so just remember to state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, it's Scott Hogg at 3533 Northwest Norwood. I would just ask that maybe we could have the previous speaker get another opportunity to speak to us. I was completely unable to hear her, and I could tell by the faces of many of the members on the council that they were too. And I think it's only fair that she be given an opportunity to say what she had to say in a way that you all can hear her clearly and that the citizens can hear her clearly. And that would be my request. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for your comments.
Okay. And we have Scott McElhaney. I've unmuted you on our end. Please state your name and address for the record.
Okay, thank you. Scott McElhaney, 4227 Northwest Sage Loop here in Camas. I heard most of what Susan said, and I think that's great. And I know this has been an issue for years, and it's becoming more critical. The thing that, have we talked about the source of this pollution as opposed to the filter? I know the filter is important. I get that, but you know, it's kind of like saying we should just overuse glass and then recycle. Shouldn't we talk about the source of this? From what I understand, I may be wrong, but a lot of the source of this is, you know, from homes and other areas surrounding this filter. So I don't know. I think we talk about this filter over and over again, and I get it. We need to fix it. It needs to be a functioning filter. But and maybe Susan was saying this about the fact that people or institutions pollute. But from what I understand, this is maybe not pollution, but I don't know what else to call it. Anyway. I'd like to also include the source, maybe if you're going to talk about that later on. Another thing is I want to congratulate Mr. Fox, if he's on, the new city administrator. Saw the video today. I think it was a great video. Mayor McDonald and Mr. Fox were in today. I thought that was great. It was really nice to see him. See, they grew up on the East Coast, going from a Walgreens manager to being recruited to the city, you know, city, what, 10 times the size of ours here in Camas, but I think ending up where he did at the city of Portland, I think is fabulous. And glad to have him on board and looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, very much for your comments.
Okay. Kevin Bergstrom, we've unmuted you on this side. Name and address for the record.
Sure, as long as you've got me. Kevin Bergstrom, 1210 Northeast 277th Avenue. I represent the East Clark Professional Firefighters. And I just wanted to bring back to the forefront of council's attention the study that was commissioned by council in, well, winter of 2019 by ESCI. At our urging to try to determine what steps forward the organization should make to basically bring the fire department in line with organizations of its type and size. And what I would hope is that having heard literally nothing about the ESCI study since fall of 2019 when it was released to council, what I would hope is that council would at least acknowledge it. At this point, I've heard literally zero information about it. Although every study has its errors, in this case, there were a lot of consistent messages, a lot of consistent data that came from the previous 4 studies that council has commissioned over the last 22 years of my career. And so I would hope that council would take some time to adopt at least a portion thereof, or some portions thereof of the study, or at least discuss it, because there's not even been that. Our organization, as an essential service, has been sitting kind of stagnant for the last bunch of months, waiting for this study, waiting for some implementation thereof. And I would hope that council wouldn't be so short-sighted as to try to bury, ignore, dispense with the study information, because there is significant value in that. So I just wanted to bring it back to light and hope that you guys would take the chance to look it over, consider it, discuss it, and if there's any opportunity, bring us on board to to help discuss that with you. So I appreciate it. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, we have Marie. You're unmuted on our end. You can state your name and address for the record.
Hi, Marie Calarami, 5724 Northwest Elway Drive. And I just want to say I'm so excited about the momentum to clean up the lake as expressed by the council members at the last meeting and the video with Commissioner Hogan and Mayor McDonald. And I'm really looking forward to the presentation on the agenda today. I want to say I appreciate the leadership role for Commissioner Hogan that he's taking in this. And I did raise my hand for two other reasons. First of all, I think it's really possible to save the lake for the rest of this season. I really do. And the second thing is I learned 3 things in the last month that can allow us to reach this goal. And some of you might already know these things, but I feel it's important to understand why the goal of stopping or at least minimizing the algae blooms is attainable this season. And I know Kevin mentioned, Scott mentioned that we talk about this a lot, but I think that the biofilter is the tipping point. It's not the only reason for what's happening, but it's the tipping point. So first, there are over 122 privately owned stormwater filters in Camas. The city inspects almost all of them for proper maintenance, but the Lacamas Shores biofilter is one of only 4 biofilters draining into Lacamas Lake. And of those 4, I believe it is the only one that is not fully inspected. Also, the Lacamas Shores biofilter is, I believe, the largest in the city, being 10 to 20 times larger than the average biofilter. The second bullet is that the city has an easy 3-step process to require proper maintenance for all privately owned biofilters. The first step is that the city visually inspects it and creates a report. The second would be that the city sends a letter to the owner that requires them to fix whatever is mentioned in the report. And the third step is that the city just sits back and receives the owner's plan for compliance. And that's it. So in 2019, there were at least 46 inspections by the city with 38 compliance letters that were sent out. 16 of those required removal of trees, either in a bioswale or a wet pond. So the question is, why not us? And then finally, as a reference for what needs to be done, I've been pointing out before that the DOE's best management practices for their stormwater manual in Western Washington requires, removal of vegetation periodically. Well, it turns out that the city of Camas legally adopted those standards in 2016.
About 30 seconds, Marie.
Thank you. And the via Camas City Ordinance 16-019. And it's in the city code chapter 1402. So knowing that, I can confidently say that the DOE's best practices for stormwater wetlands trumps all other standards other than those created specifically for the Lacamas Shores biofilter. So in summary, following the city's 3-step process and the DOE's maintenance standards, we could have the biofilter ready to catch more phosphorus by October, which is likely the next high toxin time for the lake, if we look at what happened last year. So thanks again for all your help in working on this. And I know it's a long process, but I think this could be a really quick win-win for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Marie.
Okay, there are no other hands raised at this time, and there has been no public comment received via email. And just as a reminder to the public, if you would like to make public comment, you can do so by emailing public comments at cityofcamas.us, and those will be entered into the record for both the workshop and the regular meetings up to an hour after the close of those meetings.
Thank you, Barney. We'll move on to the workshop topic. Kathy, coronavirus relief fund options. You want to present that to the council? And you're on mute there still. Sorry, Kathy.
Sorry. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Today, this presentation is to review the best use of the coronavirus relief funds for the City of Camas. Tonight, Council will consider directing the Mayor to sign the interagency contract with the Department of Commerce and the City to receive $722,700 in funding for the COVID-19 impacts from the CARES Act. This contract does not bind the City as the specific use of funds, but rather it provides the guidelines for appropriate spending, and which we will cover in the timelines considerations. The contract can be signed prior to spending the funds as well, as long as we spend the funds before October 31st, 2020. As you are aware, we received an amount of funds which is less than what some communities have received because of our size. That said, to date, we have spent more on the COVID-19 pandemic than was listed in listed in this presentation. And we anticipate, given this current trajectory, unfortunately, that we're in right now, that we'll continue incurring costs due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the need for additional PPEs and staff leave. We also want to provide an opportunity, but the purpose of this presentation is really to provide council some background about the specifics of this funding source, as well as to weigh in on priorities that are important to council. So the CARES Act, this is the disbursement requirement that we have. It's to be used for unbudgeted costs incurred from the public health emergency from March 1st through October 31st. In the contract itself, it does provide some additional guidance on use, but there's also guidance from the U.S. Treasury that we've been given. Given that, the 6 areas of reimbursement really are medical expenses, public health expenses, expenses for public employees dedicated to COVID-19. And we'll get into that in a minute. Expenses to facilitate compliance with the COVID-19 measures, economic supports, as well as other COVID-19 expenses. And to be all fair, guidance has been broad and in some cases conflicting. So we have been trying to do our due diligence and try to get as much information as possible to make sure that we truly understand what the practical uses are of these funds. So I'm going to go through each of those high-level categories and try to give you some additional information about that and what we propose by staff, the use of those funds. For the medical expenses, some of these don't pertain to us, obviously, public hospitals, clinics, but some of them do, such as emergency medical response expenses. And so when we look at that, working with the Chief Swinehart's staff, the staffing levels that we can directly attribute to this would be 115K, and these costs are as of June. That cost would definitely go up since we are still in the pandemic. Ambulance air filtration modifications. So in each of the ambulances, we can there is some additional cost of 18K that would provide greater air filtration modifications, which would protect the employees, as well as ambulance supplies, additional that are COVID specific of 17K. Public health expenses, again, these are more dealing with the communication aspect of it, as well as the PPEs, which everybody's familiar with, and disinfecting. These are definitely, there's additional law costs here that the city could qualify for, which the communications contract that we currently have for getting information out to the public, that was 27K. We got the additional, this tool here, Zoom, we've been using it multiple times a day currently, 8K. PPEs, and this is, like I said, as of the end of June, about 38,000 that has been spent across the city. Janitorial equipment, janitorial and equipment that we needed in addition to keep our workspaces clean, 12K, and cruise shift weeks where we had different public works crews working one on, one off, just so that we had some continuity in case there was an outbreak with the employees, and that was about 215,000. And then quarantining certain staff, about 1875, and that number's actually grown as well. Payroll expenses for employees dedicated to the COVID-19, that's really primarily the fire department, and that has been called out in the U.S. Treasury guidance. So we feel pretty comfortable that one's an allowable expense. It's 146,000, even though it's budgeted. That's where people there's a gray area there with this expense. Even though these staff are that are actually working right now, we can be reimbursed for some of those costs. Expenses to facilitate compliance. This has been with what we've spent for employees working at home, which is about $5,400. Leave, people that have family, the allowed 80 hours of taking care of someone that's sick in your family, as well as somebody who is at home for childcare, about 22, almost 23K. And then since we have the city annex building requires some additional cleaning and some retrofitting of some technology in order to allow us to take payments and help our citizens with utility bills, about 10K there. Those were some additional costs that we did not budget for. And then the one that we've talked about quite a bit, the Support Local and Save program, also qualifies if we so choose. And the last area is just the helpline for the library qualifies as additional options. Other options are nonprofit support, additional parklet programs, rent assistance for some of our residents, as well as some of our business owners, and relief. Meal allowance is actually one of them as well. So I just wanted to open it up for council to actually have an opportunity to discuss these. And then what our plan is to, like I said, the contract isn't tied to these expenses. We would be happy to look at our budget and modify if council so wishes. And but that we have to remember that this money was supposed to get us all the way through to the end of October. And as I said, we've already spent probably about $755,000 just on the response to this pandemic. And I'll leave this for discussion at this point. Thank you.
And so Kathy, did I understand it correctly as well, that we get all of the money basically at this point, but we have options. One of those that I was curious to see how the council felt was, now that we're still in phase 2 and it's uncertain to as phase 3, from a business standpoint, this could be very challenging as well, to potentially putting some of that money aside and having some sort of system that if businesses were having some challenges staying afloat currently with some of those unknowns, having some of that availability there as well to help support them. I don't know what that process would look like, but that was something that we discussed, and I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that potentially as well. Steve?
I think you used the word process. For me, that part is critical. I think if we're taking federal money and we're going to use it to attempt to help businesses, the process that we use to analyze that should be pretty thorough. I'm not sure how to do it, but it's quite possible we could give money to businesses and then they still go broke.
Right.
And my understanding is that we might be on the line for having done that. So I'd like to make sure we understand the process and the federal requirements for how that money is given out. Those are my
I agree
comments.
as well. I think the process would be key, and I also don't know what that would look like. Or Kathy, has there been any jurisdictions that you know of that have been able to make that happen?
There have been quite a few jurisdictions that have been trying to do some assistance, but it varies dramatically what each of these jurisdictions has done. And also we already are starting to hear lessons learned from certain jurisdictions who say, oh, stay away from this method. That didn't work really well for our community. And then others that recommend some other options that are more targeted. So we can definitely bring back some other, if that's some options for that, if that's something that council would like to do.
So question, it seemed, oops, go ahead, Greg.
Oh, you were first. I raised my hand.
Yeah, I just blurted. So in terms of relative expenditures, it looks like the majority of it, a couple $100,000, is proposed to going to the fire department. And I noticed the fire department on there twice, once for medical and one for payroll.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between those? And that's, so that would be like 30–40% of the total would be going to emergency services. And about 10% of the total is going to businesses through our Shop Local and Save. So I'm curious a little bit more about that.
Sure. The one thing that we do know is that there will be no issues around the reimbursements with the federal money. It's multiple times expressed the emergency medical support.
Okay.
Because they're the front line for the city on COVID. I mean, we don't have a clinic or anything like that, but we do have transport of these patients. So you have a lot more in the way of protection for the current employees that are on
Oh, I see.
the actual transport itself with the air filtration, but also the employee staff. Their staff time is reimbursed, which supplant funding, but you could also use that funding, and that allows us to use to help with other PPEs and other places in the city as well. So it's interesting how that one doesn't fall into the unbudgeted, but other areas do. So, and
Okay.
Frontline.
So if we go with the two fire department, the medical expense and staffing, then we're assured of getting reimbursement, no questions, check. And then a question is, Washougal going to be contributing any of their CARES funding towards the emergency service staffing or costs?
They not this round, but they said that if the HEROES Act provides additional funding, they would be open to that as well.
Okay. And then thirdly, if we were to set up a program in addition to the Shop Local and Save for businesses, it doesn't really matter if it comes out of the 722K or if it comes out of the general fund, because we've already used the 722K anyway. So we're just kind of shifting. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Greg?
Following that EMS logic, are there known costs of where we've incurred costs and have not been reimbursed either through insurance, Medicaid, or whatever that are eligible for EMS transports related to COVID? A, don't need an instant answer, just making sure we're thinking through that.
Mm-hmm.
And B, through our utility forbearance, deferral, whatever words we're using for the homeowners and residents of the citizens that are served by our utilities, what is eligible in reimbursables for the utilities that affects everybody's rates eventually?
On the first one, the sorry, on the utility side, I'll have to go to the second one first. The utility side, that one is because we are assisting those who are having difficulty paying their bills. And that's where we're allowed to use that money for that purpose. And so that one is a known use that we can use. On the first one about the transports, that one's a little more challenging, as I understand it, to do. It's not that it can't be done, but it's a little more challenging because a lot of times the patients don't know they may suspect that they are COVID-19 patients, but they may not know until they get the testing at the hospital. So it's a little bit harder to say, okay, that transport I just did, they can say with likelihood that probably was given the symptoms and what the patient is telling them, but they don't know for sure. So they're doing some, I know that from talking to Cliff Free that they're looking at ways of doing that, and they may have by now figured out a way to do that, and I can bring that back, or Nick can bring it back.
Thank you, Kathy. And then are we anticipating any further fundings, or where are we at with that? Do you know, Kathy, have you heard much?
Yeah, the HEROES Act is what Congress is looking at right now. The House approved a package. Now it's in the Senate. Looking like it's going to be revised, or there'll be a different alternate to consider. They're committed to coming up with something, as far as I understand, by August 7th before they adjourn. And right now it ranges anywhere from $1 trillion to $3 trillion, depending on what options they're looking at. Both of those sets of packages, it looks like there is money for state and local government is a priority, given that how hard hit some of these local jurisdictions have, and as well as the state have been hit.
Thank you. Any other questions, Shannon?
Would it be possible to consider rent assistance with getting this money?
Yes, that's a possibility. We can look into models of that, what other jurisdictions are doing as well. So I can bring back the businesses as well as what rent assistance looks like.
I'm really hoping that Clark County is successful in giving
I know.
should have received.
That's a good one. And sorry, Kathy, one more question while I'm thinking sorry, Bonnie, you got something there?
Just to follow up with Shannon's comments, and it kind of references back to Steve's. The process to, I mean, we don't have a strong partnership or a mechanism to analyze these applications. And that is a concern that we're not getting to the people who really need it. And that concerns me, is that if everybody just puts in for it, those who actually need the assistance the most aren't going to receive it. So if we go that route, I know that we have talked about partnerships with other organizations that actually work with people who need rent assistance. If we have a strong partnership, I would be willing to look at that.
Excellent. And Kathy, do we think that 722 is going to grow as well? And I know that there was some back and forth as far as not getting that full amount, or that it was a higher amount than the 722. Have you heard anything else about that?
I have not heard anything more. I'm waiting, and I think that the county is still waiting as well to hear a response back. And so I will try to reach out and see if anyone else has heard anything yet.
Anything else around the fund options? So we'll move on to the second quarter financial performance. I'll hand it back to you, Kathy.
Okay. All right. Council and Mayor, today, this presentation I think is much more upbeat. This one is, we are looking at, as we review the second quarter financial performance and looking at, as you recall, the first quarter we looked at all the way through April because we were in the middle of we just had started going into the pandemic. And so we wanted to see what the impact was. This one is, we are in the throes of it. And, but we are starting to, in this one, starting to see a little, I call it the hope quarter. I think we were very hopeful in this quarter, and July hit. So we'll go over the usual areas that we typically do, starting with the first thing that we'll look at is give context. What were the indicators? What were some of the things the economists were talking about? So the mortgage rates were lower. Unemployment shot up from 3.5 to 11.1 in this quarter. Retail sales were drastically lower as well, negative 1.4 versus 9.1. CPI dropped, gas prices dropped modestly. But May was really a turning point for labor. We actually saw people starting to go back to work. Those were typically people that were furloughed and that were called back into work. And we saw some home prices appreciating. And but the thing that we all are realizing now is that the quick reopening equal to quick higher COVID. What's a cautionary is that the stock market recovered, but the real economy is really struggling. So typically stock markets mirror the economy, and in this case, they really are a market in and of themselves at this point. So the general fund highlights, you see that our revenues really held their own. I mean, we went from same time last year, 9.3 million in the general fund to 8.9 in the second quarter of 2020. Expenditures, this is primarily due to the proclamations we had in place with hiring freezes as well as seasonals on hold. The impact was that it brought in $4.7 million to the general fund. That's seasonal, so that's an issue of caution because that's property taxes, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And 44% of the budget was spent where you would anticipate about 50%. So the departments did a great job managing that. And our general fund budget stood at just shy of $9.3 million at the end of June. And our overall cash and investments for all funds was 75.7 versus the 69.7 of last year. Some of that is bond proceeds. So revenue-wise, you can see that the general fund, the property taxes did finally come in, and so we're at where we should be. But you can see there's other areas that we're not so much where we should be, which is to be expected. It's primarily places where you're interacting with individuals with like licenses and permits, some of our recreational programming that for charges for services that didn't exist, and some of our court costs or court revenues from fines and forfeitures. The good news though is property taxes they came back with a delay that you recall the Clark County Treasurer extended the due date for property taxes from April 30th to June 3rd. And so given the higher amount in the first quarter and then just a tiny bit of a lag in 2020, we're actually sitting higher, right where we should be, just above 50% in our property tax collections. Sales tax is another good number. We were just like in the first quarter, between new construction and online sales increasing. This trend is we see continuing. This is an increase about $440,000 higher than last year. This is also a trend that I was talking to our neighbors to the east in Washougal, and they are experiencing a similar thing. So that online sales is a big component. Real estate excise tax. REIT is only 2% from what we anticipate from 2020. So you can see that spike at the far end of the right. We are anticipating that this is primarily probably 80%, 85% of this is existing homes. And we expect this one to continue in 2020 for a while, primarily due to the growth from the flight to the suburbs and with mortgage rates remaining low. So that this is one we will continue to watch. This is a similar graph. It's looking at the seasonal time from June. You can see the green bars are all the month of June's. It's from 2015 and 17 and 18. And you can see that those are usually larger months for the most part. And we actually did pretty well. Part of this might be due to the movement into phase 2. As you can see that April and May were not as high. Building permits. This is one where building permits actually improved, especially when phase 2 occurred. And we expect the pace to moderate somewhat, be closer to the year 2016 in permits. Probably a growth rate that is a little more slower, but still a growth rate. And so we'll welcome that. And if you have further questions, I'm sure on this one, Bill Berkland can jump in on that for more information. As far as intergovernmental grants, this one, we don't have the coronavirus relief fund, the one that we just talked about. As soon as that happens, you'll see this spike in federal grants, which is this one that's kind of lagging on the bottom. Charges for services are areas that we would expect to be a little bit lower, which we're looking at the community development fees because things will be slowing down. A little pickup in court revenues, but the recreational side is non-existent because there isn't really any programming going on or rentals right now. Fines and forfeitures are really holding their own for the most part. And then general fund expenditures. This one we do have, this first quarter really includes through April. Because that's what we showed last time. I just want to make sure I got the contrast here to show you that management has carefully worked to keep these budget lines at or below budget for second quarter, and they're doing a great job. And then the general fund balance. It remains strong, and we anticipate at this point that given that the actions taken early on with the proclamation of the hiring freeze, for example, no travel, no overtime, capital projects deferred that were not essential. We'll be closer to the $8.1 million in fund balance, which is close to 32% or 3.8 months. That is going to be really crucial, especially if we are looking at a second go around with the pandemic, and if and hopefully not, there's a rollback in the phases. If we go back to phase 1, this will be essential to get us into the next year. And looking at streets, this is typical. This is more of a seasonal one. I'm not going to spend much time here because this is usually when you see more preservation is the biggest cost in this fund, and that's just starting to happen with the seasonal work that they do. The fire and EMS, even with the delay in EMS property taxes, we're back to where we expect. And the fire department's doing a great job keeping their expenses in check as well. They have a projected fund balance of about $2 million, which is will be helpful too as we potentially go into the next phase. Stormwater revenues this is capital. The difference between the expenses to the 50% is the capital that we should see in the summertime for the third quarter, and then solid waste right where it needs to be, and likewise with water sewer. This graph shows the cash and cash equivalent assets that the city has as it grew as a city. But I want to call out what the core services are, because this seems like a very large number, and it is. But the majority of this is utilities as well as capital, and I'll show you that in a minute. This below shows how well the city has built up its fund balance. That helps us during these really low times that you see in the graph before, when we had to borrow from the line of credit because we didn't have enough liquidity in certain months, because we're so property tax based that the most of our money comes in April, May, October, November. And so it's really crucial to have some cash built up to help us get through our summer months and in our winter months as well. So here's that composite to kind of give it perspective. General fund is up here. Our special revenue funds are things like streets, some of our the fire, and then the debt is that piece that we're collecting taxes for the final payment of the library bond. Capital is for several projects such as the Everett and Lake intersection, Brady Road, those types of projects. And then utilities are water, sewer, stormwater, and solid waste. Here's our investment portfolio, and it again demonstrates where we are and how the city has really weathered this so far, the pandemic, pretty well. Yield curve, I just want to show this because that impacts the next slide that you'll see. The good news is that the yield curve, it has normalized. It's more this one. As you remember, we had an inverted yield curve for quite a while last year, and it actually is starting to normalize. And that explains this spike. A lot of as the interest rates have dropped dramatically from anywhere from we were investing money in the 3% and 4% range, is now down to 0.2 to 0.5 or 0.6 in agencies that we're looking at. This, the Washington State pool is one of those. You can see that this is our overnight money has dropped from over 2.5% down to, I think it's 0.37, and the Clark County pool is also dropping. We should be able to weather this because we have money longer term, and we'll, so far we've already collected enough interest this year that we have budgeted for the whole year. So the portfolio is doing very well. Line of credit, this is our renewal that will be considered by council at the regular meeting tonight. And it shows you the use of funds right now. It's a $7 million line of credit. We haven't used it very much right now, but we anticipate once we go back to more normal construction activity, and we're waiting for money from the state of Washington for reimbursements, this will be more active. And then this is just a graph you saw last time, just for those who haven't seen it, the projects that we have financed and the projects that we financed and now the final payments are on. So the outlook, setbacks from the virus might start. That gives us pause about whether or not we will have possibilities of, you've seen some retail stores already in bankruptcy. And so we want to be carefully watching that. Impacts our banking and liquidity. There is already built into what you're seeing on the stock market that there is hope for some additional funding for more money in a package from Congress. But as you recall, remember we talked about the W-shaped recession. And so right now we believe we're in the middle of the W and looking at possibly now another down trajectory. So they're saying that the first recession that only lasts like 2 or 3 months is done. We've been in a recovery, but that may give rise to this. We have more COVID-19, we might be in another recession. So I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point.
See Shannon and Bonnie. I think Shannon, you had your hand up first.
Kathy, would you mind just explaining a little bit more why we need a line of credit?
Absolutely. Lines of credit are just more like when we typically have used it for 2 reasons. Primarily, the biggest reason we use it is that when we borrow money from this, we have loans from the state, as well as when we receive grant money from the state. There's usually a lag because we have to submit requests for reimbursement. So we submit all our paperwork that for all the money we've spent. It may take anywhere from 30 to 90 days to receive that money, and we bridge it with just the line of credit.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bonnie?
Kathy, this is more explanation maybe for those who are watching or those who may watch this later. Those large balances in the utilities, those are restricted funds, correct? We can't use those for anything?
Thank you for bringing that up. I sometimes don't recognize I need to probably call that out and make sure people understand. Yes, utilities are water, sewer, stormwater, and solid waste. Think of them as private businesses, not pay the general fund. They cannot loan money. They are standalone, and the ratepayers have paid for a certain service as well as infrastructure for those services. So that money that the ratepayers pay needs to stay with those funds. And those rates are planned out for that. Fund balance may look very large, but it's also saving for those future projects. So the next reservoir, for example, or the next pipeline, those pipes that you see going in on Lake Everett are all being paid by those utility balances. And those are expensive projects.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Kathy? All right, thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Steve, Clackamas Lake water quality update, lots of comments today on it as well. Can you give us an update on that?
Yeah, and I'm actually just going to be the controller here and hand it over to Councilmember Hogan to start things off. So let me share my screen. So hopefully that works for everybody.
Does for me. So I'll take it away. Basically, I started on this project, met for coffee with Judith Lawrence first in October and then in January. And we talked about the lake in both of those meetings. And she talked about the fact that she and her daughter got sick while they were cleaning up the lake in 2019. And in the January time period, we were looking at more algae blooms. And so that threw the red flag up to me, and I got a hold of Barry and asked if I could talk with Steve Wall and with Jerry Atchison about getting together with Clark County and trying to figure out what we need to do. And Steve and Jerry basically went and had several meetings. Steve will talk about those meetings a little later in this presentation. But the long and the short, if you remember, Council, I came in at the end of January, early February, and asked you to consider changing the lake to a recreational lake. When Steve said that the health department at Clark County had asked him if we'd considered that, it just blew my mind. I couldn't figure out what was going on in terms of that, but quickly we brought it up. We declared that it's a recreational lake, kind of moved on. But I've been doing a lot of research on how this whole lake developed and what took place. And that designation made a heck of a lot more sense. This was built as an industrial water supply. Lacamas Lake existed before when the Indians were here and before white men arrived. It was a lake. And in 1883, Henry Pittick came over from the Oregonian and decided that this would be a good place to establish a paper mill that would supply his Oregonian newspaper. And so what he did, he started out by buying 2,600 acres, and it went all the way from where the current mill is all the way up through Lacamas Lake. And he had a motto that he was going to have for this mill town. And the motto was, if you live in Camas, you're going to work in Camas. And so off it went. And the lake was clearly being used for industrial purposes. One of the first things they did, there was forest all through the whole area of the city of Camas that you see right now. This was a giant forest. And they needed to dam the lake. They built 3 dams, and those dams immediately raised the level of Lacamas Lake 12 feet. And that's where the garbage at the bottom of Lacamas Lake began. Because if you can imagine the Columbia River raising 12 feet, you're going to pick up everything that's along the side of the river and drag it in and make it a part of the lake, right? So anyway, right from the beginning, we started adding things to the lake. So he started out with 2,600 acres, and he bought another 400 acres and made what was called the China Ditch to the north of the lake. And these ditches were created, 3 miles worth of ditches. And the purpose of those ditches were to make sure that the lake wouldn't get delayed, or the water from up in the watershed wouldn't be delayed coming down into the lake. So immediately what you've done is you've taken out the filtering system and you've created a much more accurate and faster way to bring garbage into the lake. So, and then right after that, the main goal was to take down the lumber from all around the lake and float it down the lake and send it down to the mill. And so we had lumber mills on the lake, 2 of them, and one lasted about 60 days, opened, caught fire, burned, fell into the lake. The other one lasted over a year, caught fire, burned, went into the lake. And that was kind of the end of the lumber mills on the lake. But what we've done is right off the bat, we've done a lot of polluting to the lake. So we start in 1883, and 1889, what we're living in becomes Washington State. So this all started before Washington was a state. And nowadays, there's plenty of regulations and lots of good science that tells us what we should and should not do around a lake. But right off the bat, we kind of messed up, and we've have a 137-year history of adding more to the lake than it deserves to have. So if you could move to the next slide, I'd appreciate it. Okay. Now, this lake and this watershed are a key part of our legacy. Our legacy includes the mill, includes all the downtown property. He bought the property, he made the laid out the city, sold it to the citizens, brought it, it came all the way up to the lake. So he sold the school district where Doc Harris and where Zellerbach is, the headquarters. He sold all that property to the schools, and the company, the paper company, eventually donated Lacamas Park and the lily fields to Clark County. And so the county and the city have been basically a part of this whole process since we became a state. We bear responsibility for dealing with this lake now. Up till now, the mill has always been thought of by Clark County as an industrial lake, and it no longer is. It's a recreational lake. And if you were down to the lake this weekend, you know what I mean. That was, you couldn't even keep them out when you told them there was algae there and they could get seriously ill. Could we go to the next one? So these are pictures from yesterday. You can see that there are a lot of people that had no fear of using the lake. I think it's our responsibility as a city, the city of Camas, take the lead on this and make sure we do our best efforts, not just in the short term, but in the long term, to make sure that this lake is a great recreational lake and it's a crown jewel for Clark County and the state. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, so I got a bunch of asks. Thank you, Ellen Burton, who told me I better document my asks here. And the first one is the city needs to own a share of the responsibility for the current water quality with Lacamas Lake and create a project to move this effort forward to improve the water quality. And I'm not just talking about a short-term project. I'm talking about we ought to own it as long as we're a city. We ought to be overlooking that lake and making sure that it's in good condition for our citizens and for the citizens of Clark County. We have to dedicate resources to the improvement of the water quality. That's money, which we just talked about, and it is human resources. We need to have more people on our staff that are available to spend time dealing with the lake issues and push them forward. We need to assign those staff to these projects and prioritize their efforts so that the projects actually get done. And I think we need to have, we need to work with the citizen groups and other government bodies if we're going to get this thing to successfully move forward. Those other government bodies, besides Clark County, would include the Department of Ecology, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Department of Agriculture. We own a dam and a ditch, a mill ditch. So Army Corps of Engineers and various other governing entities that are dealing with regulations, a part of that lake and the watershed. We need to get regular updates for all the stakeholders. And I would say every citizen and the people in the Clark County are people that are stakeholders. We need to think of a large group. So we need to somehow get that information out there as to what we're doing on the lake and what our targets are and what we're moving forward on currently. That's an online sharing of data and details of the projects, and they can see what we're moving forward on. The next thing is, I think we need to add this project to our strategic plan moving forward. This has to be something that we talk about at our annual retreats, and as a council and staff, we need to come up with short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals for how we plan to improve the quality of the water in the lake and the watershed system. Can we move to the next one? So there's our strategic plan, and we need to fit this into that strategic plan. Moving forward.
Actually, Steve, can I add something there?
You certainly can.
Okay, as I look at the strategic plan and reflect on the intent, we already have this. What we need is to call it out as a strategic initiative. So when you look at our mission, we say the city of Camas commits to preserving its heritage, sustaining and enhancing a high quality of life for all its citizens. This is part of that high quality life. Our vision, right there, great place to raise a family, integrated with outdoors and safe. And then third, our decision principles. Number 3, preserving our integration with the outdoors. It's in our strategic plan. It's in scope. It needs to be called as a strategic initiative to make sure we focus and deliver a long-term, mid-term, and short-term solutions to improve the quality.
Thanks, Ellen. Join in anytime. That was great. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, so here we are. We've got the project, the City of Camas. We have to do program management, define the funding, and be the advocacy group for this. And we have partners that we're going to be working with, the county, the state, and nonprofits. Barry, myself, and Jerry Atchison had a Zoom conference call in June. We were trying to push Clark County to get more involved. We got on the call with the acting Clark County administrator at Temple Lens and councilperson Temple Lens and councilperson Medvegi, Gary Medvegi, and they pushed the project forward at Clark County and are working right now to come up with an interlocal agreement on how our two agencies are going to work together on the lake. That should be coming forward to the council as soon as Steve and their public works director at Clark County kind of finish the details, what the interlocal agreement will look like. But we should see it hopefully at the next meeting, and if not after that, perhaps 2 weeks after that. And we want to use, Clark County has been overlooking this lake since the beginning. We didn't even have Lacamas Lake inside the city limits until a few years ago. For years and years, it was outside the city of Camas. And so the state has a history, a lot of research, a lot of documentation, and they have a lot of expertise that can help us get off to a faster start. And so their expertise and funding of other agencies and stewardship from all the governing agencies will help us. And so we've developed 3 work streams that we're looking at. First of all, that scientific expertise, a lot of that's coming from the county, but that's going to be extended. Washington State University has done some studies on the lake. They've already contacted us and want to partner with us on that. Hopefully the school district will want to get involved. But that's the education part. And we have Judith Lawrence, who is going to head up a community group that will look at the complete watershed. So that'll take in the lake and the watershed that leads into this network. Can you move to the next ones? So I've created this objective that Lacamas Lake will be the crown jewel. Thank you, Susan Oatney, for bringing that up earlier. Lacamas Lake will be the crown jewel of the recreational lakes in Clark County. For generations to come, it'll be one of the true success stories in our city's legacy. And will continue to be the city where we live, work, and play. And so moving to the next one, I think it's all yours, Steve.
Thank you. I think Councilmember Hogan covered quite a bit of it, but from a staff perspective, we have been working with him to determine a path forward. and really who is it that we're going to be partnering with. You know, the topic, I'm sure you can imagine, Council, with your input has generated a lot of interest, not just from citizens, but there's some technical experts out there that I'll talk about in a little bit that have begun reaching out and contacting us about ways that they might be able to help. So a lot of interest out there. Councilmember Hogan mentioned Judith. She has been awesome in this, helping to push things forward and make sure that we're staying on top of things and trying to move something forward. And that's been tough. You know, this is something that staff is not an expert in. We don't have somebody on staff that can just take this and run with it, right? So we're trying to rely on those experts. We're trying to make the contacts, and we're trying to get the right stakeholder group pulled together so that as we move this forward, we know that we have the right people involved. And so part of that is the citizen group. And so Judith is taking on the role of being a coordinator for a citizen watershed group and trying to work with staff to figure out things that they can do, you know, even immediately here as they get interested citizens that want to participate. What is it that they can do? So we've been brainstorming off and on with actually everybody we talk to. We try and figure out at this point what are the things that we can or should be doing. We're not the first community to go through this. There's been others out there. There are other lakes that have had water quality issues. And so one of the things is really trying to figure out, you know, where can we go? So research other examples, see what's been done out there, and then learn from that, right? And see if we can apply it to our situation here. Again, not having the knowledge on staff, we want to reach out and find those experts and learn from what those others have done. And so that's something that the citizen group should be able to do is do some of that research. They also should be able to help us educate folks. That's something that I think Councilmember Hogan mentioned earlier as well, that there are, or maybe it was one of the comments that we had received, but there are lots of people around the lake and everybody can do their part. I think sometimes it just comes down to people not knowing exactly what that means. And so if we can have a citizen advocacy group, if you will, that can be reaching out and educating people and helping get the message out, I think that's going to go a really long ways, especially in the long term. And then I think the other piece that kind of wraps in here is our stormwater utility. I think we have a unique opportunity here because there is a lot of overlap between our stormwater utility and the lake itself. In fact, the lake is mentioned in the stormwater standards. There's special exemptions that we get because of the large water body, basically. And so there really is a tie to stormwater, and there's a lot of things that we have to do in our permit with the state that will hopefully overlap here. And there's ways that I think we'll be able to use the citizen group as we move through that. And then I won't spend a lot of time here. Councilmember Hogan mentioned a lot of the groups that we've been in contact with, but there's been a lot of discussions over the last few weeks, especially on this topic as a whole. And I do have a meeting coming up on Thursday with the County Public Works Director and their Clean Water Division that has played a large role in the lake in the past. So the studies that were done 10 to 12 years ago, that staff is actually still at the county. And so they are a terrific resource. But really we want to work with the county and figure out what that partnership really is. And so the interlocal agreement that Councilmember Hogan mentioned, that's what the intent is here in the next week or two, is that we figure out what that means, what roles we each want to play, and then be able to bring that forward to the respective councils and really get moving down the path. The other resources, Department of Ecology has been great. They have a water quality specialist that works in our area. I know a lot of you have heard about the source assessment that is on Lacamas Creek that's in the ecology's plan, except that it's out 3 or 4 years probably. And so we're working with them on ways to potentially move some of that work up, or maybe phase it and be able to get some done now so that we don't lose that ground moving forward. And then Wazoo Vancouver, Washington State University, Vancouver, great people. There's actually 3 or 4 different professors there that have done work on Lacamas Lake or in Lacamas Lake over the past few years. There is definite interest there. I think they're going to be a terrific resource moving forward. Councilmember Hogan, I think, spoke with the Clark Conservancy District, Conservation District. I think they're going to be a resource for us moving forward. When I talked to Department of Ecology, they also said, hey, make sure you reach out to them. They're going to be able to help you with grant applications and finding money and finding the right resources. So there's another agency there that, that we can tap into. And then I mentioned earlier the consultants. There are very knowledgeable firms out there, again, that have done this all over the place. And so I think, you know, ultimately we are going to need to tap into some of those types of resources. And so as we do that, we'll move forward and make sure we find, you know, the right fit for the process that we're trying to go through, and make sure that we get good help on board. So with that, I think that the only other thing I would mention is funding opportunities are going to be important. Every one of those agencies, all the conversations we've been having with folks over the last few weeks and months, actually, they've all mentioned different types of funding opportunities that we might want to look at. So we've essentially got a little list going, and there's some that are coming up really soon. And so we're going to, you know, I think discussions with the county are going to be really important, and with others, so that we can get some applications pulled together and start looking at some of this funding more seriously, so that we can have those resources on hand and be able to move some of this forward. Overall, obviously, right, this is an awesome project. Can't stress enough probably that this is a long-term effort. And what I mean by that is that, you know, we're moving. If we can find, you know, quick answers in the near future, that's great. If we can implement in the near future, that's terrific. The piece that I hope everybody remembers is that long-term as a community, there's a management piece. And that's something else that I've learned to focus on a little bit more here with the experts that we've been talking with, is that once we implement something or we find you know, a good short-term solution, that's just half the battle. The real battle after that is years and years in perpetuity, where, you know, us as a community need to manage the resource and make sure that we don't get here again, basically, right? So that we can keep it pristine and the way the community wants it. So that's going to be important to remember when we get there. So with that, I might hand it back over to Councilmember Hogan.
Okay, I take it the next one was the questions slide. Does anybody have any comments, questions they want to ask? Shan?
Well done, Steve. That's an awesome job. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's my only comment. Thank you.
You can get better than that as far as comments go. Steve, very nice job, and it's great to get the history as well, both Steves. Some of the callers had mentioned some of the biofilters and potentially something around those. Steve, can you kind of give just an overview of the biofilters or any kind of thoughts on that?
So are you Steve 1 and I'm Steve 2, or what?
Yeah, Steve 3.
Go, Steve.
Steve Wall, maybe.
Yeah, just and maybe, you know, big picture of course, there's multiple discharges coming into the lake from all different areas, you know, all the way around the lake. The biggest of which is Lacamas Creek, of course, by volume contributes the most water, but all of the other discharges, Lacamas Shores is a great example because we've talked about it quite a bit in our meetings. You know, the biofilters, it's part of the stormwater system, if you will. There's various kinds of stormwater treatment facilities that are located throughout the city. And I think Marie Calarame earlier mentioned, you know, there's over 120 facilities in the city. They all, to a certain extent, treat the water and then discharge it into the system which ultimately makes its way to the lake. And not all of those go to the lake. The Prune Hill, obviously, if you're on the other side, those facilities go a different direction, but there's a large number. And I think those are going to be part of the process, right? And in the sense that all of those discharges that come into the lake at the different points around the shoreline, we need to figure out how they're contributing to the water quality. Is the water coming from each of those discharges good? Does it need to be cleaned a little bit more, or is there something that we can do? So they play an integral role in this, which is, again, where our stormwater utility plays a big partnership with the water quality in the lake itself. Does that help?
Yeah, and I would like to add to that Marie pointed out, there's quite a few storm ponds that lead into one outfall, as an example. And Bonnie Carter and I did a little 6-foot distancing walk around the city to look at various storm ponds, and not all the storm ponds look healthy. It's possible to develop algae in a storm pond. And so the question is it really, are we actually getting algae coming out of those storm ponds and leading down to Lacamas shores and heading out to the lake? So testing, this gets back to money and staff time, but we not only have to check the outfalls at the lake, but when we find an outfall that is faulty, my thought is we need to go upstream and begin to find where the source, the root cause of the problems are. There's an education portion of this that we need to do with our citizens to make sure that they're not actually making the situation worse and ultimately dumping it into Lacamas Lake. But the testing is going to be needed to go upstream and figure out where we have storm ponds that perhaps need to be worked on. So anyway.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, thank you for, Don, you got a question there?
Well, I have a comment and a question. I've lived in Camas for almost 48 years. I'm in my 48th year, and I've been with the city for that whole time. And more recently in the last 12 or 13 years as a council member. And in that time, a long time, as you'll probably agree, I see this as the most significant undertaking that this city has ever, in all the time I've been here, undertaken. And there's some irony in it because we're calling the property acquisition north of the lake our legacy land project. And isn't it ironic that our most valued resource, the majestic diamond of the city, is sick? And it's been sick for a while. And so I just want to say that for me, that's the prominence of this project. And I will commit my personal and whatever council influence I have to helping, not just getting this done, but not to let it go away like it has through the last two projects. And my hope is, you've just announced our new city administrator. I'm excited to see him come on board. My hope is that, Jamal, if you're listening, please help us embrace this and let's get it done, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Well said.
I feel like we're making some traction. Thank you very much, Steve. And thank you for the ownership of it, and thank you for your support as well, Steve Wall. And anything else? Anyone else got any? We'll move on. Public Works, Steve, back to you. Do you have any topics?
Yeah, I do. I had questions on a number of projects, and we have a lot going on right now. I thought I would try and give a brief update on some of the larger ones that we're working on. But the first one is not under construction. It's actually the 38th Avenue Phase 3 project. We've talked about that in the past. We had a grant that we received through the Regional Transportation Council. It was Federal Surface Transportation Block Grant funds, if you remember, about $813,000 for design and right-of-way, and that's a process that we're starting right now. RTC staff actually contacted us here a couple of weeks ago and asked if we were going to apply for that same funding source for construction. Initially, we were going to wait on that because design will take at least a year. Right of way will take probably that long, and just the federal process itself, we know takes a while. And so we thought about waiting, but as we talked with them, I think they encouraged us, and seems like a good opportunity to try and maximize our grant funds for construction through this same source. So we submitted an application last Thursday. The application was for just over 1.4 million for construction. And based on current estimates, we have a total construction cost right now of approximately 3.4 million. So if we're successful in obtaining this grant, we would need about $2 million more that we would need to find funding to move forward on construction. And this grant, one of the things why we thought it was a good opportunity right now is that we would need to complete the project by 2024. And then if we needed to, we could apply for an extension to go out to July of 2025 if necessary. So that's quite a bit of time for us to, get through design and right of way, and then look for other funding sources. So if we're successful, that would be the plan, is that we would continue looking for additional funding as we proceed through the design and right of way. So we just wanted to make sure council was aware that we submitted a grant application, and that, we would come back to you and let you know if we were successful, and we could always have more questions and opportunities to discuss then. So I'll pause on that one. Any questions or comments? No? Great. So I will hopefully quickly go through the rest of these. So Lake and Everett Roundabout project is going pretty well. Lots of concrete been poured over the last few days. If you haven't driven by, with a lot more to come in the next couple of weeks, where they'll start pouring the concrete roadway itself. Quickly approaching the next phase of the work, where traffic will be shifted onto the new roundabout, or at least partially will be used. And you'll notice, if you take a look at the website, the initial phasing had us reaching that point on, by August 1st, essentially, or the end of July. With the COVID shutdown that we had and a couple other delays on the project, we ran into some rock. We're probably a week or two behind that, but the contractor's doing a great job. They're trying to make up as much time as they can, and hopefully we're still on track with our original schedule, but it's definitely going to be tight, to say the least. So as we get moving over the next month or two, we'll make sure and keep council updated. Brady Road paving, there should be a notice going out on paving that you'll see. So the final lift of asphalt is coming up. They're going to start on Monday the 27th. It is weather dependent. It looks right now like that's going to be still very nice next Monday. And they're going to start at 3 a.m. on Monday morning and try and get done with the 16th and Brady intersection prior to the commute time. So they'll hopefully start at 3 and be done by 7, so that as traffic picks up in the morning, that'll be done and they can open the intersection back up. Once the intersection's done, they'll take the next day or two and they'll pave out the rest of the project, and there'll be the normal 1-lane closures while they're doing that. But the intersection is going to be the key work. So we've coordinated with adjacent neighbors, and again, there's notices going out today. And everybody hopefully will be aware of that. So, the reservoir project up on the hill at 18th is moving quickly. If you haven't gone by, it's looking good. The steel is actually going up right now. They're tacking it in place as they go, and the intent right now, they're moving very quickly. The intent is that project is to be done by September. And hopefully that'll be coated and fully functional by then is the intent. So going really well. Lacamas Creek Pump Station, the project right along 3rd Avenue at the trailhead entrance there at Lacamas Creek. The primary pump station is nearing completion. We've had a couple of comments. If you drive by, the one thing that I think a lot of people notice are the big white cabinets underneath the shelter area. We are aware of that. There is screening and fencing that still has to go up. And so, you know, the intent is that screening, landscaping essentially, and the fencing will help cover that up. We're also talking about different options there, that if the landscaping isn't quite enough, there might be some other things that we can do to make it so those white cabinets aren't so visible there. But more work to come on that. So I think if people can be patient, or if you hear that comment, the landscaping should do quite a bit as they work through that. And then as part of that project, we received a couple of comments, good comments, because we ground out the asphalt on Southeast First. That's been a comment, I think, through the years that people in that neighborhood around Louis Block would like to see First Avenue repaved. And so we had an opportunity there. One, it was on our pavement preservation program, but then that's also the road where we're installing a new pipeline as part of that pump station project. And so that's getting ground out and should be repaved here in the next few days, actually. So that's a good project for the neighborhood from that perspective. And then speaking of pavement preservation, if you were out on Camas Meadows Drive today, they should have started grinding the section of Camas Meadows Drive that's going to be done. It should be repaved here probably by Wednesday. And then Cedar Street, just south of 3rd, between 2nd and 3rd, along the new Riverview Bank site, that will also get ground out and paved by Wednesday. So that's the pavement preservation work. So, and then the last one I have for you is Northeast 22nd Avenue. That's the one that takes off from Everett and goes over towards Ione in front of the admin building there. They are moving along nicely. They've installed the 24-inch water line and should be tying that into the existing system next week. And then paving should occur, you know, well in front of the end of August or before school starts. So that road should be nice and fresh, assuming that we have a bunch of buses and people driving on that here come the school season. So we'll see what happens, but at least the road will be done. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Sorry for just running through those, but I thought that would be okay, since we haven't had a lot of time here over the last few months to kind of catch up on that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions for Steve?
No, but it sounds like he's been busy.
Busy.
Staff's doing a great job, especially through the COVID scenario. It's, you know, it has not been easy for them to track the projects, and a lot of us working remotely at home. And so the coordination activities are, it's been a lot tougher than normal, but they're doing a great job.
I know there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that most people don't see, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Shannon. Jennifer, any updates for us?
Nothing tonight.
That was easy. Looks like we have a little bit of time, so we'll go around and do council comments and reports. It's been a while since we've had a workshop meeting. Councilmember Smith, we'll start with you. You're on mute, but did it sound like you were good?
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Roberts?
Just a few things. Just busy like everyone else with various citizen concerns. Let's see here. Couple things. Met with the firefighters union reps today, Kevin Bergstrom and Brad Delano, to talk about their concerns, and he's already spoken about that earlier. Met with the Clark County Veterans Advisory Board and discussed how we could help homeless vets throughout Clark County, and the Clark County Veterans Assistance Center is doing a really good job with that. Let's see. I've spoken with Steve Bang at length, but Steve Hogan has already taken care of all that. Just wanted you to know that I did my little teeny tiny part. Let's see here. Fielded citizen concerns concerning wearing face masks. They felt like it was an infringement upon the personal rights to make a determination concerning their own health. Also spoke with Terry Brandley, who is the state point person for dementia-friendly training for businesses, corporations, police departments, and so forth. And she does training to help people understand the type of needs that people with dementia have, and how to treat them when they come into the store, when they come into the city hall to pay their bill or whatever. So I'm working with her on that. I've already spoken with Kathy in finance concerning that issue, and she was interested. And I was hoping that maybe we could discuss sometime now or maybe in the future concerning fireworks and how that's affected the citizens of Camas. That's all I have. Thank you.
And did you have thoughts on the fireworks, Shannon, or?
Well, I know that there were quite a few citizens that wrote in concerning their issues with fireworks, and I wasn't here last year, so I can't do a comparison in how many complaints we got, but I think they're valid complaints. And Vancouver has banned them from the city, and I see no reason why we shouldn't do the same, to be honest. I know I'll probably take some hits over that, but I am a citizen as well, and I think it's important that we look at that.
Any other thoughts on fireworks, or anyone else have any? Ellen?
Yes, I also received some comments on numerous emails, as I'm sure everyone else did, regarding fireworks. I believe it was more than we did last year. And I would recommend that we discuss that at an upcoming workshop. And there's a couple of reasons. First, the change in policy in our bordering communities that Councilmember Roberts just mentioned. Second, it's changing community perspective. The demographics and community has changed significantly over the last 5 and 10 years. And thirdly, the increasing density. For those reasons, I would recommend that we put this on the agenda for a future council member or a council meeting. Thank you.
Sounds like a plan. And was that it? Sorry, Councilman Roberts?
I was thanking Ellen. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Perfect. But that was it, though. Sorry as well. Councilman Carter, move on to you.
Thank you. I was fortunate enough to attend a virtual library board of trustees meeting this month. It was the first time since March, and it was good to see those folks. And it was really good. We were able to, the board approved an inclusion statement for the library mission statement. And I just want to commend Connie and her staff for all the work they have done and are doing during the pandemic, and for bringing that inclusion statement to the board to have it approved. It is very important work that we're looking at. And speaking of inclusion and equity, there's been some emails coming to the council, and there's been a small subcommittee of counselors with Counselor Anderson and Burton that we are discussing some framework for a citizen-led equity commission that we would like to present as an option to the mayor and rest of council in August. It's important work. And to the citizens who are wondering where we stand, know that we are mobilizing and hoping to bring something forward in the near future. And my final comments is that just as if the citizens aren't aware, finance and smaller subcommittees have been meeting on a weekly basis throughout this pandemic to keep an eye and receive updates from Kathy about our finances, and it seems to be paying off, those weekly meetings, as we listen and help advise So we've been very busy behind the scenes when you don't see us. So that's what I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Councilmember Anderson?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to play a little cleanup. Comments on fireworks. There's been many from the community, both through the email and reaching out in person, as well as phone calls. I strongly urge we have a serious conversation at a workshop that's well noticed so that people are paying attention and can have some weigh in both on the front side and the end of any conversations we have. Also in the Equity Commission that Bonnie mentioned a few moments ago, that's been a great effort that we're doing some very preliminary steps on. And yet we're trying to frame the conversation so that the full council can take some viewpoints and say, what do we want to make this for Camas? Not to say it has to be just like somebody else's. We want to make it ours so we own it and we can move it forward. Also want to echo the comments from Kevin Bergstrom. I would also like to suggest we put that on a future agenda so that we as a council have the opportunity to discuss the fire master plan, our views on it, perhaps consider adopting it with revisions or modifications and move it forward, I would hope, including any capital facilities plans and economic plans so that the funds that we've been acquiring through impact fees can be appropriately planned for and spent. Right now, they're just going into a bucket of money and there's no output. Last but not least, I think, is I've been attending virtual CTRAN meetings for the last several months. CTRAN has been doing a very good job of serving the community as a whole and responding and trying to be a leader at the same time being responsive. It's a fine line from a service delivery organization that I want to commend Sean Donahue and his key leadership and the employees there on the work they do every day at 4 a.m. or at midnight or anything in between in helping the community get through what they do best, and that's moving people and serving people. And that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Councilmember Hogan? You're on mute, Steve.
Yeah, that probably works a lot better. The couple issues I wanted to bring up. One is that the finance department has brought this up before, but they're working on line item detail that'll be available for citizens to be able to look at what's happening financially within the city, and they're making progress on that. And the hope is that in addition to that, we'll be able to perhaps have some budgets that go into that type of detail for the next 2 years, but also have triggers that correlate to phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, if those should happen, and how that would impact the budget. We're trying to make the financial aspect more visible to the public, and I applaud Kathy and her group for working on those ideas and trying to get it into this year's budget. I sent out a note during the last couple of weeks about robotic process automation. We get a lot of questions asking for details on this and that, whatever, and we have a lot of various computer programs throughout the city, and it seems like if we could somehow have an overlying way of quickly pulling those out, that information for the public, it would save a lot of staff time trying to dig those details out, and would be more clearly understood by the citizens. I know Jennifer sent me some articles on the robotic process automation, and I'd like us to think about how we could upgrade our computer system so that staff can get to those answers more readily. The Black Lives Matters, the writings that have been removed from the walls. I'd like to ask this council, for people that have been around a while, how we originally got to that. It seems to me that at least during the last 15 years, it was taggers. We basically put walking orders for the staff together that the school district had come to us and asked us to put in policies that would deal with tagging in a more rapid fashion. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Because it seems to me that we gave marching orders to the city staff that when
It's graffiti.
yeah, as graffiti goes up, or
Yeah.
whatever we wanted to call it,
Right.
however we defined it, it was to be dealt with quickly, especially, and it was aimed towards tagging,
Yeah.
remembering it quickly. Do we need to revisit that? And so, yeah, Don, what?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure I put this in the category of graffiti, but it's a movement that wants to be heard, and I respect that and appreciate it. But let me start with your request about history. If you look at our ordinance book, and I'm sure Mitch Lackey, I see a blank screen, so even though he's muted, I know he's on. I trust there's still an ordinance that requires no advertisement of any type, not just commercial, on any facilities that are in the city parks, and I think maybe even city facilities in general. So that may be the origin for why this happened. And, you know, it's real difficult sometimes, even though there are allegations back and forth about who's right and who's wrong. I just express that I see the purpose of it and appreciate it, quite frankly. But there are folks that don't, and we serve them as well as our citizens. So coupled with that ordinance that I think makes it's prohibited, I believe that's why our staff, and I appreciate the fact that our staff does their work. It's just bad timing now because of this, but it's still a standardization of the enforcement of that ordinance that they're following. So I'm not critical of our staff for doing what they did.
No, I'm not critical of staff either. I just
agree.
Trying to think it through, and it seemed to me it was.
Do you think that we should take a look at that ordinance, Steve, then basically, and take another look at that to see if we can?
Yeah, I don't know if the rest of the council feels that way, but it seems like this is an appropriate time to perhaps reconsider it. Since we were aiming at graffiti, and this is not graffiti in my mind, but maybe the rest of the council thinks it is, but I don't know. It's worth a conversation, and I had that on my list.
Greg, you have your hand up?
Only to comment, it's hard for a staff to execute when they're evaluating content of any, I'm going to call it generically artwork, and I'm not opposed to the artwork that's been being discussed. And that's where I think this equity commission can provide a reasoned voice to balance the issues and the perspectives and perhaps provide a framework, because I'm sorry to say city code is pretty black and white, because when it gets gray, it's usually very awkward for people to execute against the code, either pro or contrary. So I would suggest we continue with our current interpretations, but recognizing that there may be some hurt feelings along the way. It's not an arbitrary process. It's just the way, unfortunately, government has to process the change in society faster than the government mechanics can catch up with it. And that's my view, and we'll see where it goes.
Melissa?
Just for clarification, I call it, I'm not saying the Black Lives Matter, whatever was written up there is graffiti. I'm saying graffiti as a whole, anything that's tagged or written where it's not supposed to be written, in my view, is graffiti. Now, I'm not debating what was written up there in for or support of it. I just saw it as the matter being, it wasn't appropriate, regardless of what it is.
Okay. Thank you. I just think it might be worth a conversation. Last item I had for the council was on the capital plan for the fire department. Wasn't that supposed to be part of the study that was done? If we were dealing with release of impact fees for fire, and there is no capital plan for the fire group, and that was a part of that, why are we in this position? Or am I misunderstanding that last fire study was supposed to deliver to us as deliverables a capital plan that we would potentially, that we were going to use moving forward?
Steve, this is Nick. Yeah, the most recent plan from ESCI that was commissioned did not include building a capital replacement plan such that could be used for the city's capital improvement plan and thus usage of our fire impact fees. So no, that commission study did not include that aspect.
Okay, thank you. That's it, Barry. I'm turning it back to you.
Thank you, Steve. Councilman Burton.
Mute.
Okay. Per the earlier council members' comments, I would like to make sure that we get the fire plan back on the agenda for workshop. We have a lot of work to do in that area, and we put it on hold due to COVID and other conversations with partners. So I want to make sure that gets on the agenda. Attended a webinar with Dr. Melnick, Council for the Homeless, on the impact on homeless in COVID and what the county is working on. Then Columbia River Economic Development Commission has continued to work on bringing new business opportunities to the county, and also was facilitated the acquisition and distribution of grants to county-wise and Camas businesses, and our own Carrie Shellstad was on that committee. Then I also want to speak out for the need for an equity commission that we'll be bringing to council. And it's important that the city recognize that currently, although getting back to our strategic plan, we say we want to create a high quality of life for all its citizens and developing the community to meet the challenges in the future. We're not currently doing that, according to the people I've been listening to that have been telling me how much they're currently hurting. So I want to elevate that in importance, and that's going to be a very significant cultural change along the lines of the lake, which is a process, environmental ecosystem change. And then the last thing I want to bring up is the Round Lake bridge jumping, and to want to make sure that we take a position on this and give staff direction on what we want them to do. So I said something in advance just for you to follow on. But first, we know we have a public safety hazard that's created when kids and others jump off the bridge at the Round Lake Utility Bridge. On the slide deck that Councilmember Hogan put out, there was a picture of a teenager doing a great belly flop right into that channel in between kayakers and paddle boarders. We know what happened last year. We lost a teenager. We don't want to happen that again. There's a risk here to our community, and as part of the council and the staff, we're responsible for public safety. There are options to look at. Some include like do nothing, low-cost options such as adding a sign, or higher cost options such as fixing the bridge. We know from human behavior that actually adding a sign may deter some, won't deter all. Making a substantial change to the bridge could deter more and has a cost associated it. There's resource costs to the city. Our police department is not staffed nor funded to enforce kids jumping off the bridge, and it would create a very poor perception and interaction. We don't have the parks and recs resourcing to enforce this. So my question is, how do we want to move forward? What do we want to do, and how do we get movement? It's going to require direction. One option is to do nothing. That puts us at risk for our community and public safety. Other options have varying results.
Is this something we want to put on another workshop then? Is that what?
Probably.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. And then I'll go quick because I think I have 5 minutes. A few things. One, Ellen, you did not mention that you got the achievement of your certificate of municipal leadership. So congratulations on that.
Just following in the footsteps of my other esteemed colleagues.
Melissa Smith got it in 2017 and Steve Hogan in 2007. So congratulations on that. As Don alluded to, again, we'll talk about it later as well. I'm very, very, very excited. This has been an extremely busy week. This has been an extremely busy year, but we have support on the way, and I am ecstatic about that with Jamal Fox. We put out that video introducing him today. I have a letter here from, this is a request from the Southwest Washington League of United Latin American Citizens Council, wanting us to sign on with some other cities to the Department of Health. I know you guys, it was sent to you guys as well. They were asking for us to sign on with it. I know Washougal did it last week, I believe. I'm just kind of looking for a head nod, I guess, if this is something that everyone's good with. Greg, Bonnie, Don, Ellen, seems like the majority of us, easy. I just wanted to touch on a few other things as well. We're doing a, as Steve mentioned as well, Kathy's been doing some fantastic work around the budget and breaking some of those things down. We're looking at the 2021-22 budget. One of those things that we're going to put in there is an urban forester position. This is something that both the community development and ourselves believe can be a big benefit. And again, this is something then that could help. Tree committee could be integrated into an expanded tree program led by a person with expertise, and I think there's value there. So that's something together that the team is putting together an ad package for that. And then it sounds like we've got, so for some upcoming topics or some upcoming workshops, just so I'm on the same page here, fireworks is going to be a conversation that we can put out there. Master plan and the ESCI around fire is something that we need to discuss. Our current ordinance when it comes to art and where we're putting it and those rules seems to be something that we can dig into and talk about. And then round lake jumping, what in fact wants to happen or not happen and when it comes to the bridge. So I think those are what I have on my list as well, that we'll start to figure out how to do it. It sounds like the fireworks one we want to maybe push out a little bit so we can get some communication also so that people are aware of that. And I think that's kind of it for me right now. Bernie, I'm going to hand it back to you to see if there's any public comments before we wrap it up for our 7 o'clock meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. We do have a couple of hands raised. If you have a public comment, you can just click the raise hand icon in your app, or if you're calling in, you just press *9. Okay, John, you are now unmuted on our end.
Thank you. John Lee, 444 Northwest Fremont Street. My comment, first, I'm glad to have the meeting and wanted to follow up on Camas Lake. If I understood the presentation correctly, we were labeled an industrial lake and an industrial water supply until just this year or extremely recently. My assumption is that an industrial water supply has a different, lesser water quality issue and set of standards than a recreational lake is. And acknowledging the discussion that this has been a problem for a very, very long time, it seems to me that the switch from an industrial water supply to a recreational lake was putting the cart before the horse. We should have had clean water before we accepted becoming a recreational lake. And obviously the citizens would hear, oh, we're a recreational lake. We are going to go enjoy recreational type activities in the water when the water quality is not safe. So is it possible to reverse that designation back to an industrial water supply until we actually get the water quality problem fixed? Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. And then Steve Hogan, could you follow up with John on that possibly? Steve
Sure.
Hogan? Beautiful, thank you.
Okay. We have Gerlyn. Is that how you pronounce it? You're unmuted on our side.
Yes, Geraldine Holland, and I'm at 2535 Northwest Ogden. And I just wanted to say I appreciate the comments of the council members, Hogan, Councilmember Burton, and Councilmember Carter in regards to equity in our community. I think it's really important in that a committee would be a huge value to necessary work, because it is true that racism is alive and well in our community. I've talked to a number of people, and it's just really disheartening to hear their stories. So if we can do things to create a community where everybody is welcome, I think that that is so important, and we do have work to do. Also, in regards to the artwork or graffiti or however you want to categorize it, one thing to consider is that it was chalk paint. And that could be something that could be allowed in the policy, because chalk paint is not graffiti in nature, and that it's not permanent and not deemed offensive. Could be some sort of written words in the policy that makes that appropriate and acceptable to have, because I think art is an important expression for students, and students put that up there, and then to have it removed, I think is hurtful. And it's been removed 3 times, and I think it's been deeply hurtful to the people that felt like they were expressing something that they're hurting right now. So I think that's important. And if we can make strides to not do that in the future, I think that would be important. And then lastly, I'd just like to say I am so grateful for the Camas Public Library. Their equity and inclusion statement was incredibly strong. The fact that they acknowledged that the American Library Association participated in systemic racism is an important acknowledgement, and that is the first and most important thing to step towards doing what's right for our community. And the fact that they're making an ongoing commitment, I'm just really proud of that statement, and I think all of our systems could benefit our community if we followed their example. And I think that the City Equity Commission would be a great first step. And sorry, I'm emotional, so I'm gonna just leave it with that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Geraldine.
Okay. Randy, I have unmuted you on our end.
Yes, good evening, counselors. Randy Curtis, 947 Northwest 43rd Avenue in Camas. I miss you guys. You know, Zoom meetings are okay, but I'm looking forward to getting back to face-to-face communications and problem solving. So I just wanted to speak briefly to the Camas Lake issues that Councilor Hogan presented. And Steve, thank you so much for that report. You and I have communicated a little bit recently with emails. I particularly learned some things tonight about the history, which I think is important to the process as we begin to understand how we move forward. I want you to know that I also reach out to Judith Moran's and I've asked her to let me be part of her committee so that I can act as the liaison to the Parks Commission. With respect to the Parks Commission, we started our annual report about 6 months ago, and we have identified the lake cleanup issues as one of our goals. We have not had a chance to formally present that to you, but I would like to, it will come to you when we finally do our annual report. And I think to that point, Steve, love to have you or someone come to the Parks Commission when we get back together and give that report again. There's just a lot of good information there. One other comment, the reference that was in the documents on the screen talked about objectives and scope of work and so forth. The language referenced Lacamas Lake, and I'd like to encourage the language to be broadened a little bit to really include all 3 lakes, Fallen Leaf, Round, and Lacamas. It's all part of the watershed, and those are all part of the critical recreational issues that not only affect Camas, but you probably all know this, those lakes are really a regional jewel for many people, including people in Oregon, the Portland area that come over here. So just reference those 3 lakes in that study. Let's see, I think and then I guess the final comment I would just make is the Parks Commission would like to be a part of this project and this work. And when we can all get back together and finalize our reports, we can better define exactly what the role of the Parks Commission would be. So thank you very much. Great job. Thank you, Councilor Cheney and Burton, for your comments a little earlier about how critical this particular issue is to our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Randy.
Okay, there are no other hands raised. And just as a reminder to everyone, if you would like to submit public comment, you can for up to an hour after the meeting, and it will be included in the minutes. You can just email that to publiccomments@cityofcamas.us. And that's it.
And I think, Don, did I skip you, by the way, or did I not? I can't remember. Did I?
Yeah, you did,
did.
But I was just going to reinforce a couple comments, and maybe if there's a comment time in the next meeting, I'll do it. Otherwise, I'll just reach out to the council separately.
We'll make sure you get time in the next one. I'm sorry about that. And,
no, okay, I understand we're late.
I checked your name, but I didn't. I got confused. So, all right. With that, I'm going to call an adjournment to the meeting, or the meeting is ended.